The Ukrainian armed forces have taken back most of the city of Kupiansk, which is in the north of Ukraine in the Kharkiv Oblast, in spite of the fact that Vladimir Putin announced the city captured and returned to Russia about 10 days ago. Kupiansk in the Kharkiv Oblast. It is not in any of the oblasts that the Russian Federation has claimed they have annexed. However, they're still attacking it nonetheless. But what does this reversal say about the nature of the Russo-Ukrainian war as we go into 2026 and wartime propaganda mixed in with the fog of war? So if you look at the map here, we have from yesterday to today, updated by the deep state map. That's normally with a delay of a few days, but we've had this announcement that officially it has been retaken by the Ukrainian armed forces, except for a few pockets of Russian resistance that will presumably be eliminated. Either those Russian soldiers will be KIA'd, captured, or they will find some way to evacuate and get back to their own lines in the coming days. It is actually something that we have seen happen also north of Pokrovsk. This is the city that is being heavily fought over, well, really for about 15, 16 months at this point. However, if you think back to when Vladimir Putin went to see Donald Trump, just before that, this was in Alaska, if you remember the Alaska summit where Donald Trump rolled out the red carpet for the Russian dictator. And just before that, there was an announcement of a huge breakthrough by the Russians just north of Pokrovsk. However, that breakthrough was also pretty quickly reversed in a similar faction where those troops outran their supply lines and basically got encircled, and a similar fate awaited them that awaits the Russian troops currently in Kupiansk, the few that are left. So what is going on here? Kupiansk, the city itself, it was captured in 2022 at the beginning of the extended invasion by Russia. It's in Kharkiv Oblast. That is not one of the parts of Ukraine that Russia currently claims it has annexed. Nonetheless, they're, as you see, have attacked it quite a number of times. And it was liberated by the Ukrainian armed forces in the Kharkiv offensive in the autumn of 2022. However, because Russia was not so far away, they managed to come back to the city pretty recently and seem to have been in control of most of the city just about 10 days ago, because Vladimir Putin went on Russian TV and announced it captured. However, as we see, that has now been reversed, and it seems to be a trend where Russia makes these breakthroughs with a penetration that is not consolidated into a proper salient, and as a result those troops end up losing that territory. Now that doesn't mean that Russia hasn't been making small incremental gains on other parts of the front lines. However, this kind of advance is unusual in the context of the war. We haven't seen it happen so much that they would grab control of a town on a narrow sliver of territory and then lose it again. So why is this happening? Is there a change in tactics? The Russians have been using smaller groups of soldiers. We see it also in Pokrovsk, which has been heavily fought over, that they will take a territory, raise a flag, take a photo or a video of it, which is very useful for propaganda purposes, and then those troops may be eliminated or they might withdraw, and they're not actually in control of that territory at all. And Ukraine will do something pretty similar. They will send in some troops, also raise a flag, take a video clip, and then circulate it. So what is the value behind taking a territory like Kupiansk? Presumably those soldiers are either going to be captured or eliminated. Maybe some of them get back again. However, it is an expenditure of resources that doesn't seem to make much sense in terms of maintaining control over captured territory. Well, if we look at the political nexus to what's happening on the ground, Russia has been in cahoots with the new Trump administration, been pushing for a peace deal. I'm putting air quotes because it's really a medium to long-term capitulation deal of Ukraine that Ukraine is not going to accept in its current form because it doesn't guarantee their security, and they would have to give up territory, legally recognize currently occupied territory as being de jure Russian, and also withdraw from the Donbass area including the territories, the land is now being fought over. So from a Ukrainian point of view, with the current state on the battlefield, it does not make much sense. However, in terms of the propaganda value for Russia, being able to say that they've captured a city allows them to project an impression of ineluctable advances along the front lines and that Russian victory is inevitable. The fact that these advances get reversed doesn't seem to make it into the mainstream media that frequently. They normally talk about a big Russian advance, Russia strong, Ukraine weak, and that is something that Donald Trump has been doubling down on when he's ever talking about Ukraine, especially since he signed off on a Russian 28-point plan proposal for pausing it's supposed to end the conflict. It will not almost certainly do that in reality. So therefore, we see the value for Russia in claiming, even if it's only for a short amount of time, that they have captured some city in eastern Ukraine and they are on a roll, and it is only a matter of time before they capture it all. They have repeated that they will take the Donbas region, either because the Ukrainians are bullied into a capitulation and they retreat from that territory, or they will capture it militarily. However, if we look at the latest estimates for how long it will actually take Russia at the current progress rate to capture all of Donbass, it's about 2 to 3 years with hundreds of thousands of additional casualties. So the reality is that Russia would have to be able to maintain the war at its current pace for another 2 to 3 years just to capture the Donbas region. Now, of course, Ukraine may collapse in the meantime. That's what Russia's obviously hoping for. And that is why they are pushing on several fronts in terms of the propaganda back home to keep people signing up for the military. Hey, victory is just in sight. Think about that as an incentive with the high sign-up bonuses given to Russians who sign up for the military, if you really believe that Russia is about to either win very shortly or that Ukraine will be forced into this capitulation, that you might actually be able to sign up and then survive for a few months, if you're using that logic, and collect your large amount of income, including the bonuses. However, of course, as the war goes on for several more years, then the chances of you surviving are pretty low. So there are lots of different elements to this. You got the domestic front. Putin's number one priority when he wakes up every morning is what does he need to do today to stay in power tomorrow. Winning the war is secondary to that goal, and that's something that he's been criticized for a lot. And here we have him declaring certain cities captured, and then very soon afterwards they are retaken by the Ukrainian military. So it seems curious that he would set himself up for criticism. Why is he complaining, or why is he announcing these places captured when in a week or two any serious analyst can see that it's been retaken? That is not how the public sees it. You see it also when the Ukrainians recaptured territory that had been taken back in August and eliminated those Russian troops. Did it get so much fanfare in the Western media? No, it did not, but it gave Vladimir Putin a boost when he went for that meeting, when he was welcomed by the US president, despite being an indicted war criminal and threatening, not just Ukraine, but the rest of Europe with some sort of territorial expansion. It served to present him as being in a stronger military position than he really is. And that is one of the important parts of the information war and wartime propaganda, is to make something look inevitable so that you can have a self-fulfilling prophecy. So will be interesting to see what other advances by Russia get reversed, whether this continues. Maybe it's also in nature of the tactics that they're using smaller groups that then become isolated more easily. There's so much drone warfare now. I recently watched both 20 Days in Mariupol, which was shot at the beginning of the extended invasion in 2022, and also 2,000 meters to Andriivka, which was shot in the summer of 2023. Both are from the Ukrainian point of view, uses real footage that was filmed in Mariupol's case by some journalists, and then on the soldiers' kind of headcams from 2023. And you can see how different the war was fought in both of those two instances from each other and from today, where really drone warfare has accelerated so quickly, and using big mechanized formations is very problematic because the drones can see everything on the battlefield pretty quickly and move to eliminate troops or material that is moving along. And neither side has come up with a solution to counter that so far. So what we've seen is Russia advancing with very small numbers of troops that seem to get isolated, very hard to resupply, and then they get either they have to withdraw or they get eliminated or captured by the Ukrainians. So on that note, I got my Farmer Forces t-shirt on today. That was a meme that started at the beginning of the invasion, with so much Russian heavy armor ended up abandoned in fields, especially around Kyiv, and it got towed away by the local farmers. Slava Ukraini, Героям слава, до перемоги.